Hello friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am a faculty, Department of English, Jogesh Chandra Chaudhary College, University of Calcutta, Kolkata. Friends, we are into module 23 dealing with Elizabethan prose. This module is written by Dr. Madhumita Majumdar, who is a faculty, Bhangor Mahavidyalaya, Kolkata. Friends, in this particular module, we are going to look into how did the Elizabethan prose come into being, what are the major social, literary contexts, what are the areas of concern, who are the important contributors of Elizabethan prose. On the whole, we are to assess the importance of Elizabethan prose in the context of the Elizabethan literary tradition. As we already know that Elizabethan age is marked for sonneteering tradition, plays, and it is the age of the Renaissance. So, one contribution or one part of contribution under the head of prose that contributed a lot to the growth and development of literature in the Elizabethan time. Friends, it is difficult to concretely state the beginning of the prose writing in English literature. Nevertheless, using the Renaissance as a term to describe a literary phenomenon and age, then Sidney's Arcadia, Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy, or the essays by Bacon, and the writings of Milton and Browne, and of course the very development of the English Bible are to be seen as a cultural phenomenon that ushered prose writing into English literature. Friends, if you ask a question, who is the first stable prose writer in the Elizabethan age? It's John Lyly. John Lyly, 1554 to 1606, who was about the same age as Spenser, published the first volume of Moral Romance of Euphues. The second and the concluding volume followed within a year. Most notably in prose, Lyly would have gone to inspire Sidney's Arcadia. Though Sidney himself had much exposure to many forms of foreign romances, he is also one of the university wits. Even Green and Thomas Lodge were influenced by him. Just not Sidney, but even Robert Greene and his disciple Thomas Lodge unhesitatingly said that their works were a sort of continuum of Lyly's romances. One of the Greene's volume was named Euphues. His censor to Philistus. Another was called Menaphon. Lodge's romance Rosalinde, on which Shakespeare based his play of As You Like It, had the subsidiary title Euphues' Golden Legacy. Friends, we may be troubled with the question, did drama inspire prose writing? It is largely expected that English Renaissance was dominated by drama. The drama was hugely popular, but there was a section of public who thought drama was moral nuisance. The Puritans added fuel by suggesting that theatres are part of pagan culture, hence should not find a place in a Christian society. Naturally, bitter attacks flew. One such came from the pen of Stephen Jonson in 1579, who not only attacked drama in his work, but without seeking permission dedicated it to Sir Philip Sidney, who was quite a name in the literary circle during the Elizabethan age. Sidney reacted, as well we all know, through apology for poetry. Sidney not only supported drama and poetry, but initiated a more liberal outlook in literature. And all these were being said in prose. Friends, now what's the relation between religion and prose? The age also saw religious controversies. It is thus but natural that prose works that dealt with religious subjects would abound. Some of the religious prose works of the time are Sir John Tyndale, remembered most famously for the translation of the Holy Book, the Bible, the Book of Common Prayer. This translation formed the basis for authorized Bible in the year 1611. It is written in traditional prose. His style is simple and method is direct. The reason was simple. Tyndale wanted Bible to read by the commonest of the common. The Elizabethan translation of the Bible was long drawn project of the Renaissance, and it was notably done in prose. The Bishop's Bible was published in 1568 and was then constantly reprinted until it found culmination in the authorized version of 1611. It was under the reign of James I. However, the most dignified contribution to prose literature of the age was made by the theologian Richard Hooker, who was born in 1554 and died in 1600, whose style was largely based on Latin models, cumbrous at times, but reaching heights of poetic eloquence in his works. Hooker's masterly work of the Laws of Ecclesiastical Policy is the greatest of the non-fictional prose works during the Elizabethan period. It began appearing in volume by volume in 1594 and continued till his death. It was the first book in English which used English for a serious philosophic discussion. Hooker was a Protestant, and the purpose in writing of the book was to defend the Church of England and to support certain principles of church government. Friends, we have a separate module for Francis Bacon, but no discussion on Elizabethan prose is complete without referring to this great man. So here we have a brief discussion on Francis Bacon as a prose writer. Francis Bacon was born 1561 and died in 1626, whose career started when Hooker ended his own career. But Bacon was unlike Hooker in not adopting the Caesarean method. Bacon borrowed the term and the conception of the essay from the French writer Montaigne, whose essays first appeared in the year 1580. Incidentally, Bacon's great philosophical work was mostly in Latin prose. But when writing in English, Bacon showed equal capability. Like the flavor of the time, Bacon's English writing was embedded with a native taste. In his advancement of learning, his chief philosophical work in English, his vocabulary is exceptionally polite and of excellence level. Friends, you must be wondering, can pamphlet be a prose? I hope all of you have seen political pamphlets or social pamphlets in your lifetime. So, the Elizabethan age was also the age of pamphlets. Another form of prose writing was pamphlet writing that abounded the area. With the printing press and the universities providing an ambience of some amount of free expression on various topics of life and discourse. Pamphlet writing is the natural outcome of the age. It was not exactly the work to be indulged by a gentleman or a scholar. So when Henry Howard, Earl of Northampton, got involved in the prose controversy in the year 1580, he was, of course, an exception. It was a general belief that writers who did not seek remuneration for their work wrote in prestigious genres. Print for a long time continued to be stigmatized and was not seen as respectable. A gentleman did not wish to make his writings public or common. But by the year 1580s, this dispute associated with printing was losing its base, and it was prestige of different kind of method through which the printing came to be visible. Lyly, Green, Milton were some of the prominent pamphleteers. They contributed to the pamphlet writing in prose. Friends, some random names in the world of prose writing during the Elizabethan era. William Baldwin, 1547 to 53. He wrote Beware the Cat in 1553, which is often considered the first novel in English. Then there had been Geoffrey Fenton, a translator of stories from French and Italian, that was collected in certain tragical discourses. And it is not possible to forget George Chapman, poet dramatist, who translated classics like Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. Roger Ascham, a great educationist, who wrote The School of Shooting. His second work, The Schoolmaster, contains intellectual instructions for the young. The Governor, a treatise on moral philosophy by John Check Eliot. He wrote The Heart of Sedition, which shows the influence of classicism and antiquity. His prose is vigorous, argumentative, eloquent, and humorous. Friends, no discussion on Elizabethan prose is complete without reference to Ben Jonson. The icing on the cake for prose writing towards the end of the age came in the form of Ben Jonson, who wrote aphoristic essays that were compiled, and the name is The Timber of Discoveries. The Timber of Discoveries was published after his death in the year 1641. His essays are moral and critical in nature. John Selden's Table Talk is sharp, full of aphorisms. As a practitioner of aphoristic essay, he stands next to Bacon and Ben Jonson. He also wrote The Titles of Honor and the History of Titles. Friends, there was another genre that emerged, the critical writings. The character writing in essays. The character writers would trace the influence to Theophrastus, Seneca, and other classical dramatists, and amongst the immediate predecessors to Bacon, Among those who practiced character essay writing was Thomas Dekker, who wrote The Bellman of London, A Strange Horse Race, which is full of vivid character portrayal. Joseph Hall, another important character essay writer, The Good Magistrate, and Virtues and Vices. Thomas Oversbury, who wrote Characters, which is full of well portrayed characters. He usually packs the characters to some trait and occupation. Early and superior to both Hall and Overbury is a character writer, as his style is more confident and vigorous. His microcosmography is an important collection. Thomas Fuller is popular for holy war and profane states, where he mixes his characters with interesting stories. He also imparts personal touch to his essays. Friends, then comes the prose writings through romances. A remarkable development of the time was prose romances. They anticipated novel, which came into being during the 18th century. The prose romances of this period mostly consisted of tales of adventure, as well as romances dealing with contemporary life and events of the past. The life at the court, city life, it was by turns humorous, didactic, realistic, as well as fanciful. In short, it represented the first rough drafts of English novel proper. Then friends, the critics who gave prose of Renaissance to its credit. What is interesting to fact that the scholars of the Romantic age, who through their critical appreciation gave Renaissance prose its due credibility. Foremost credit for this should be given to Coleridge and his circle. It was Coleridge's enthusiastic rediscovery of the prose writers of the 16th and the 17th centuries that changed the perception of this genre. For Coleridge, the great models of the classical style in English prose writings were Hooker, Bacon, Milton, and Samuel Taylor. Coleridge saw the existence of an individual idiom in each of the Renaissance prose writers. I think Coleridge's criticism is historical. When speaking of the glory of the Renaissance prose writers, Coleridge added Sir Thomas Browne in mind, but interestingly it was Jeremy Taylor who won the most extravagant praises from a group of romantic critics. So, you understood how the critics unearthed the prose writers of this age. Now, the 18th century and prose criticism. Through this particular part of the talk, we are going to assess how the 18th century critics assessed the prose writers of this age. The 18th century had not been very enthusiastic about the Renaissance prose, mostly finding it unreadable. Instead of usual Bacon, Taylor, this century had more readily accepted the Anatomy of Melancholy that went to have its 7th edition in 1676. But thereafter, it did not feature mainstream till 1800. After that, Keats, Lamb and others reclaimed it and used as reference text in their writings. Hazlitt, on the other hand, in the introduction to his lectures on the dramatic literature of the age of Elizabeth, in which he makes comparative study of Bacon, Browne, Taylor, and speaks and endorses a common feature of Renaissance literature in general, of being rooted in the soil. Friends, what is the prose temperament of the age? There is no denying the fact that the literary temper of the Elizabethan England was distinguished by a splendid vitality and vivacity, and covered a wide range of subjects that was reflected both in prose and poetry. The enthusiasm for the Greek and the Latin classics, the passion for extending the limits of human knowledge, which remains central to English Renaissance as it had been in Italy or in France. Hellenism, or the desire to cultivate beauty both on the physical and the moral level, was felt in the textures of literature of the time. Moral sensibility and its explorations would have been part of English Renaissance. It is true that it is to appreciate Elizabethan literature, one has to see it as having stemmed from the European Renaissance. The Elizabethan studied and imitated foreign authors with aptness and gusto. In spite of this free spirit of borrowing and influences, the national spirit was strong enough in Elizabethan England, which gave its literature individuality and essentially an identity. Friends, the prose variety. Prose in the Elizabethan age covered varied subjects from religion, politics, social issues, and so on. Though, as a genre, it did not grow to become an extant rival to drama, but the age had shown enough promise, vitality, and strength that would continue its strong march in the time to come. In the 18th century, we see the prose writing continues in the hands of Samuel Jonson, Addison, and Steele, and it leads to the Romantic age, when late 18th century or the precursor of Romanticism, Lamb, takes this away. Essay writing continued. Soon novel writing became a vogue in the 18th century, thus bringing us to our times when writing in prose is almost a norm. Friends, in this particular module, we try to locate the relevance of the Elizabethan prose writings in the context of the writings and their varieties. I hope by this time you have understood the legacy of prose writings of the Elizabethan time and their tendencies, and we all are aware of the fact that nowadays we live in the world of prose of different kinds. I hope all of you enjoyed the module very much. Thank you.